Hello again. Only a few years ago it was believed that all modern humans were descended directly from a single archaic species. In other words, there was direct descent. First one species, that gave rise to another, that first species became extinct and so on, until modern humans were all that were left. We know now that this is untrue. It's not how things happened at all. While we believed that, it was perfectly reasonable to claim that all humans belonged to a single group and that there were no inherent differences between them. That's not so, and at least 4 or 5 different species of archaic humans interbred to produce modern human races, such as Europeans, black Africans, and those in the Far East. The results of this unplanned experiment in eugenics may be discerned today by those who are unafraid of examining new evidence and open-minded enough to change their minds when that evidence proves compelling enough. Those earlier species included the Neanderthals, who lived in Europe and West Asia, the Denisovans in Asia, Homo erectus in Africa and Asia, and also an early type of Homo sapiens. There were other species whom we have yet to identify. To understand what the concept of hybrid vigour might have to do with our origins, we must look at a little background information. The correct name for the process by which offspring can have better traits than parents is heterosis. This has replaced the older word heterozygosis. When a population of animals or plants is either very small or becomes inbred, it can suffer from what is known as inbreeding depression. It has long been observed that hybrid plants are healthier and more vigorous than pure strains, although more than one explanation has been advanced for why this should be so. Animals too benefit from various breeds being crossed. This is sometimes true of the interbreeding of species. A well-known instance of the crossbreeding of different species which produces an animal which is better and more desirable and has different qualities than the parents may be found in mules. The mule is the offspring of a male donkey and a female horse or mare. They're the oldest known case of a humanly engineered hybrid and have been around for thousands of years, being mentioned in the Bible. Mules are stronger and more hardy than horses, but need less food. They are also alleged to be more intelligent than either horses or donkeys. Charles Darwin was enthusiastic about mules in their hybrid vigour, writing, "The mule always appears to me a most surprising animal. That a hybrid should possess more reason, memory, obstinacy, social affection, powers of muscular endurance and length of life than either of its parents seems to indicate that art has here outdone nature." Inbreeding depression can happen in human populations as well. If a breeding group is too small or the pool of possible sexual partners too restricted, then the chances of 2 people carrying the same mutation, marrying and producing offspring is increased. Often one copy of a defective gene is harmless enough by itself, but when both parents have a copy, their child can develop various disorders. The classic case of this was, of course, the European royal families up to the 20th century, who tended to marry among themselves rather than with complete outsiders. It's likely that this process occurred in one or all of the early human species, and that an injection of new genes from another species had a beneficial effect, creating a hybrid with better qualities than either of the original groups. Fairly soon after they left Africa, our ancestors had sex with the Neanderthals who were living in the Middle East. They mated with the archaic humans living in what is now Israel, Jordan, Iraq and Turkey, and produced offspring who were an interesting mixture of Neanderthals and modern people. They forged north into the steppes, in what is now Russia and the Ukraine, and then east into Asia, mating with another human species whom they found there, the Denisovans. It seems to be this interbreeding which was the making of modern humans, at least those who left Africa. Those who remained in that continent stagnated and interbred with a more primitive human species that remained there. But wonderful things began to happen once those extra genes from the Neanderthals and Denisovans were added to the genome of Homo sapiens, who were now spreading out across the world. It's difficult, of course, to extrapolate from the inbreeding of different groups of modern humans, which is what I mentioned earlier, to speculating about the effects of such inbreeding as they affect an entire continent, when whole species rather than merely ethnic groups are involved. This is particularly so when we do not have all that much information about how breeding between different species might lead to a new and improved species. We know that animals like the mule are thought to be hardier, healthier, and even more intelligent than either of the parent species, but mules are not, of course, a new species. Although there have been reported cases of fertility among them, this is not common enough to allow a breeding group of mules to become established as a separate species. Matters are not made any easier when thinking about the possible consequence of modern humans producing younger Neanderthals and Denisovans by the indisputable fact that scientists are not yet agreed about whether those archaic human populations even constituted separate species at all. One thing seems certain, though, and that is this. The offspring of the interbreeding between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals must have been fertile, or at least more likely to be fertile than mules. The very fact that all the people in the world today, other than some Africans, possess a percentage of Neanderthal DNA tells us that the interbreeding must have produced enough fertile offspring to affect us all. This whole subject of the possible levels of fertility among the offspring of modern humans and Neanderthals and Denisovans is a matter of the liveliest debate in professional circles. And it's possible that future archaeological or genetic discoveries will shed more light upon it. Let's think for a moment about some of the known genes which modern people have inherited from their Neanderthal and Denisovan ancestors. These range from pretty useful to potentially deadly. One gene we could have done without is one which is found more commonly in Asians and Native Americans than it is in Europeans, and that means it almost certainly originated with the Denisovans. It has increased the chance of developing type 2 diabetes. This gene may have been handy if you happen to be living through an ice age because it would help you survive periods of near starvation. In an era, though, with an improved climate, the development of agriculture and consequently unlimited quantities of sweet and fatty food, it can lead to poor health and an early death. Some of the Neanderthal DNA contribute to our immune system and provides definite benefits. These benefits, though, also have a downside. The Neanderthals had evolved a resistance to certain pathogens, and clearly if modern humans were to flourish in Europe and West Asia, they would need that immunity from common diseases. However, a more finely tuned immune system meant that sometimes it overreacted to harmless irritants, like pollen from flowers, which provoked the body into unnecessary countermeasures. Hay fever and asthma are an undesirable side effect of this part of our Neanderthal inheritance. Other Neanderthal genes have been found to help Tibetans live at high altitudes. Despite the fact that some of the useful genes we have inherited from the Neanderthals have been identified and their purpose understood, it still remains the case that a great deal of the surviving Neanderthal DNA remains a mystery. One thing about which there is no doubt at all is that modern humans living outside Africa inherited genes from Neanderthals which related in some way to the structure and possibly functioning of the brain. It's not clear precisely what role those genes play. What we can say is that the differing proportions of genes inherited from earlier species does seem to correlate with the three main human races. Those in sub-Saharan Africa have vanishingly small amounts of DNA and none at all from the Denisovans. They do, however, have between 2 and 19% of their genes from a primitive early species of humans, most likely Homo erectus. Europeans have Neanderthal DNA, and that's all. Those in East Asia and Australia have Neanderthal DNA and also some Denisovan genes. It is those differing proportions of archaic DNA which most likely causes the differences in cognition and other areas of the modern human races. It may, of course, be purely coincidental that things such as academic achievement form a racial gradient, with those from East Asia at the top, black people at the bottom, and white people in the middle. It might also be sheer chance that this same gradient is seen with murder, with black people at one end and East Asians at the other, and white people in the middle. The gradient exists in many other areas which I've previously discussed. This is what you might describe as empirical evidence when it comes to looking at differences between human races today, and I shall discuss more conclusive proof in a future video.